Welcome, everyone. My name is Stephanie Mueller, and I am the Membership and Events Coordinator for the Greater Medina Chamber of Commerce, as well as the Coordinator for Medina County Safety Council. We are excited to have you here today with us for our January meeting. Sorry again for the little bit of the delay for our technical difficulties, but we are going to move forward. We do ask that you please keep yourself on mute and turn your screen share off. This will allow better bandwidth for our speaker for today. You can see how to mute and unmute, as well as turn your video off and on. If you do have questions, please feel free to pop those into the chat. Our speaker will be taking questions at the end of her presentation. Carrie and I will field those questions to our speaker, Dyann, as well. So you can ask any of those questions in the chat. So for today, we will do a Bwc update, and then we will have our speaker and then have our question and answer and adjourn. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Carrie Gray, who is our Bwc safety consultant.
Hello, everybody. Carrie Gray, Bwc Safety Consultant. I miss seeing all of you. I love at the end when we turn our cameras on. That's my favorite part. But it's good to virtually see you at this point. If you want to go to the next slide, Stephanie, that would be good. Just a couple quick Bwc updates. For any of you that don't know me, I am the safety consultant that works with all of Medina County. At this point, if you need anything, we are still only virtually, but I'm here to help you if you're having safety questions or concerns. That's what I'm doing. Just a couple other things that are coming down the road. We are doing virtual classes, so kind of like this, but very interactive. We have a couple different virtual classes. I'll show you a schedule in just a second. We have webinars. We were doing weekly webinars, but some other stuff has picked up, so we've gone to monthly webinars. And so the Bureau is actually putting out 2 a month. One is by the training center, one is by the webinar group. The webinar group's what you see there. Coming up this month, which is a week from today, we're doing Are You a Hazmat Employer? Really what we find is as we go into companies or work with companies, folks don't realize that they fall under these hazardous material requirements, even just from a small spill standpoint. So, you know, this is kind of a, do you fall under those requirements? And if so, how do you stay compliant? February, we're doing an accident analysis one, and that is one to help folks if they're in the drug-free safety program. Because a couple of the online classes we lost because of Flash Adobe went away, and they're trying to still update some stuff, but we're doing that as a webinar and then confined space in March. If you look at the next slide, you can see all the different virtual classes that we're offering. I know that's really small, but if you go to that website that's at the top, you can just type in virtual, or you can check on one of the flyers and you're going to be able to see all these different classes. I am teaching the record keeping one that's coming up February 10th, but just, you know, around the corner, February 1st, you should have your OSHA 300 summary posted. And if you are a public employer, meaning you report to PERP, you should submit your summary information by the 1st of February. If you're a private employer and you report to OSHA, under most circumstances, most companies have to submit that stuff to OSHA by March 2nd. If you have any questions on that or you're having concerns, just let me know and I can help you through the OSHA record keeping stuff. I'm not doing a class this year, like through the safety councils like we've done in the past, but I did one for Summit last week, and I can get you hooked up with that if you want a refresher, and I can show you that video or send you that video, or we can talk too. That's all good. Another thing that I wanted to bring up that was really exciting on the next slide is a hazardous communication training micro video series. And what this is it's 4 videos, and the videos were created, they're all under 5 minutes. They're created for you to use to do a lot of your hazardous communication, your HazCom training. Now, HazCom is due initially, or if there's any changes. So when you get a new employee, or when you change your program, or you change your chemicals, you have to do HazCom training again. A lot of folks do HazCom annually, which is a really, really good idea. This is designed to be that training, or to help you with that training. It comes with a guide, which is what you're seeing on the left-hand screen. The guide has the links to the videos, which are on the BWC YouTube site. It has a knowledge assessment, which is also linked in that document. And that knowledge assessment you can use to document this training. So this is just brand new, just coming out. This is something I've been working on for a couple years. So we finally got it done with communications, and the videos are pretty good. So it's a nice way to get to work on your training. The next slide, the last thing that I have is just to make sure the BWC is putting out some written programs in case you're looking to incorporate those new programs. That's showing you the ones that we have so far on the left-hand side there. We're also working on updating the safety talks. Those are kind of like a one-stop shopping for your toolbox talks, if you're doing toolbox talks, and they're showing you a couple on the right-hand side. So if you were to go to the BWC website and type in either written programs or search for written programs or safety talks, you're going to find both of those through that search. So that is the fun and excitement that I have through the BWC. Anything, Stephanie? There's my contact information and Stephanie's contact information. If you need anything, we are definitely still here for you. But the really exciting part, and the reason that you are all here, is we have, backed by popular demand, is Dyann McDowell, the founder and president of Training Marbles, and she's going to talk a little bit about the Drug-Free Workplace program and the ever-changing, ever-exciting medical marijuana. So I'm going to turn it over to Dyann, and if we could, I guess we can't really applause necessarily, but at least applause, sitting there ready for Dyann to go. So thank you, Dyann. We're so glad that you're here with us today.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Hello, everyone. So one of the things we know, and for me, it's, we're always looking at the evolution of marijuana and what does that look like? What does it mean? And as employers, what are the things you need to do and be very mindful of? So I'm going to share a lot of information with you. Where are we at? Summary of the laws. There's been a landscape of change that has happened. Looking at what, again, you need to do in regards to drug testing. There's a lot of anxiety about that, and I want to put you at ease. And I may also scare you a little bit, so forgive me on that one, because there are some changes that are coming. Ensure a clear path to protect the workforce at all costs. And then identify the foundation for your program. So what a lot of people don't recognize, one, is that we are now 29 states plus DC that have medical marijuana laws. 19 plus DC have operating dispensaries. That is growing at leaps and bounds. By the end of this month, we will have 24 states that have the operating dispensaries. 8 states plus DC have recreational marijuana laws, and then 4 states are operating retail marijuana stores. So 59% of the population now lives in a state where marijuana has been legalized in some form or fashion. Now, the dichotomy of that is that federal law today still says that marijuana is a Schedule I illegal drug. And one of the things as an employer that I want everyone to be mindful of, I want everyone to be aware of, is that federal law supersedes state law. And what does that really mean? It means what we look to first is federal. Where there is a difference or a contradiction, federal law wins out on state law every single time. But there are some changes that are coming, and I'm going to share those with you here in a bit. I know that a lot of employers are anxious about, can we test, should we test, when should we test, all of those things. And I'm going to try to cover a lot of those questions. I'm going to cover some things about CBD, which I know you guys are getting lots of questions about from your employees. And then what do we do next? Because change is, again, about to occur. So with that, one of the statements for me, and I think that all employers should have in some form or fashion, is a true, clear statement about medical marijuana. My statement, and this is the campaign I came up with about 4 years ago, and the overall statement is marijuana remains a drug listed as a Schedule I narcotic in the Controlled Substance Act. It remains unacceptable for employees to use, possess, or distribute marijuana, even with a recommendation from a physician under Ohio law. A positive test for marijuana is a violation of the drug-free policy. Now, if you don't have a statement, you need that statement, I'm going to say to you, email me. I will send it to you, because what is most important to me is that you have clear, concise guidelines for your employees across the board. So I want to look at this timeline really quickly and understand that the Department of Justice initiated the change for marijuana enforcement policies when they issued and encouraged federal prosecutors not to prosecute individuals who distributed marijuana for medical purposes in accordance with state law. And what that really did was it opened up the landscape and the conversation and the slippery slope of when states began to pass laws that really loosened the grip on marijuana, particularly for medical use. So that was late 2009. In 2017, Governor Kasich, after a long-fought battle for legalizing marijuana within the state of Ohio failed on the ballot, Governor Kasich signed into law House Bill 523. And it was a good thing, because the law that he signed into place was an employer-friendly law compared to the law that was coming on the ballot and that was initially struck down. So House Bill 523 went into effect September 2016. We now have 679 certified recommenders. Those are the physicians. We also have 48 of the 57 dispensaries are operational. We have 10 level 1 and 10 level 2 cultivators, that is on the growing side. We have 17 processors that have reached certification in the state. And then testing labs, we have 6 provisional licenses that have received certification to test the end products. But let's look at the nitty-gritty of it all. So as of the 31st of last year, we have 33,120 pounds of plant material that have been sold in the state of Ohio. We have 2.4 million units of manufactured product that has been sold, $277.2 million in product sales, and 2 million total receipts for marijuana sales, and that is just the state of Ohio. So if you don't already know, it is big business. The business is growing, and we are seeing more and more of the cultivators, the sales, people that have qualified under the medical marijuana program. So then the question always becomes, well, if I have one of the qualifying conditions, can I use medical marijuana? And that is the question that employers have to answer. It is a question from a policy standpoint that becomes critical, and it is the question that I want you to consider at all times. Now, I'm going to flash through these fairly quickly, but I want you to understand that the dispensary map in the state is well defined. There are 4 quadrants. These are the 4 quadrants in front of you. And what this map does, in the way the state broke the state up, was into these 4 quadrants, and then based on population would determine how many dispensaries were allowed in a particular area. So if you're in the southwest quadrant, there's a total of 15 dispensaries, and then you see based on the colors how many of those dispensaries where they're located. So Hamilton County, Cincinnati has 3 authorized dispensaries. When we look at Butler, Preble, and Darke County, those have 2 dispensaries in that total gray area. So they broke it out, and you'll see it in all quadrants here. Southeast, 17 dispensaries, the biggest number being in Franklin County with 5 dispensaries in Franklin County. And then Licking, Knox, Morrow, and Delaware, there's a total of 3. So by population is how these have been broken out in the state. Northeast, 18 dispensaries. When we look, the biggest area, of course, is Cuyahoga County, Cleveland, Ohio. We see this Lorain, Medina, Wayne County has 3. And then, you look over further north, further east, actually, Ashtabula, Trumbull, and Mahoning, there are 2. So those are the breakouts by the state. When we look up at Medina, where you guys are, there's 18 dispensaries in the northeast quadrant, and Medina is in the yellow quadrant with 3 dispensaries that are distributed between Lorain, Medina, Wayne, and Holmes County are all have 3 in total. So when we talk about the program and we talk about what employers need to know, I'm going to cover the law really quickly, but employers are not required to permit, accommodate, or employees use, possession, or distribution of medical marijuana. Employers can refuse to hire, they can discharge, discipline, or take adverse action against employees who use, possess, or distribute medical marijuana. Employees cannot sue their employer for adverse action based on medical marijuana use. Employees terminated under the workplace drug testing, drug-free workplace policies will be terminated for cause and will not receive unemployment benefits. Employers can establish and enforce drug testing, drug-free workplace, and zero tolerance policies. Federal restrictions on employment, including the Department of Transportation, mandate testing remain valid. Drug testing policies under the Ohio Bureau of Workers' Compensation's drug-free safety program remain valid. And rebuttable presumption that an employee is ineligible for workers' compensation benefits if the employee, when under the influence of medical marijuana, and I want you to listen to and see the squiggly there, when under the influence of medical marijuana, I'm going to circle back to that in a second, cause his or her workplace injury remains valid. Now, why did I point that out? 2 things I want you to take from the law, and this is actually the language in House Bill 523, but what I want you to take from the law itself is twofold. Number 1, you've got to have a policy in place. If you don't have a policy in place, the law in 6 different places says the employer policy, policy. You have to have a policy in place. If you don't have that, you haven't met the basics. Number 2, rebuttable presumption. And when we talk about an employee who's under the influence of medical marijuana, what I want you to understand first and foremost is that drug testing is a system presence test. It is not a test that measures a person being under the influence. And what do I mean by that? If I have an employee who smoked marijuana on Friday, they were under the influence for 3 hours, and then we drug tested them under our random program or post-accident program on Monday, and they test positive. What that test is showing is that marijuana is in their system. It's not showing impairment. Testing doesn't do that. So what becomes critical, particularly when it comes to rebuttable presumption, is the documentation. It's understanding the signs and symptoms. It's documenting, and the supervisor documenting the employee's actions that indicated impairment. And there's some pitfalls in that. And I want you to understand, though, that it is critical that we are doing the accident analysis. It is critical that supervisors understand what reasonable suspicion testing is. It is critical that we're taking action prior to an injury occurring. It's critical that documentation is moving itself up either to your safety person or HR quickly so that we can take the action that's necessary and needed. So all of those things become critical when it comes to, in particular, the rebuttable presumption. I'm going to view and just make sure I'm not missing any questions that are coming up on the other thing. So I'm going to keep going, and guys, I will get to your questions, I promise, when we get to the end. So the critical update and the question, the million-dollar question that everyone is asking is, what about CBD? What about CBD oil? Can employees use it? Is it legal? All those things. So let me give you some answers. So CBD oil and marijuana derivatives were approved by the FDA in January of 2019 under the Farm Act. And what the Farm Act actually said, so let me go back for a second, was that the FDA approval was for drugs derived from marijuana, cannabis, with no more than 0.1% THC. The DEA has not rescheduled CBD, not yet. We're going to talk about that. And the only FDA-approved drug currently is Epidiolex. Epidiolex is a very specific medication for patients, adolescents in particular, who have epilepsy, seizure-type disorders. That's the only FDA-approved medication. The DEA does still consider marijuana-derived CBD products illegal, and therefore they fall under the medical marijuana law. Now, what the 2019 Farm Act did was it made hemp legal, including CBD products. They had to be 0.3% THC or less and approved by the state legislator. So Ohio came on board. It was August of 2019 where Ohio said, okay, we're going to go ahead and approve if these conditions are met. The biggest condition was the 0.3% THC. THC is what creates the hallucinogenic high when we talk about marijuana. So I want to compare these for you, and I'm going to jump forward and then jump back for half a second, so bear with me. So the truth about cannabis is there are two species. They have a brother-sister relationship. The first species is the male, that is hemp. The other species is the female, that is marijuana. Now, when we compare the two, hemp has a high level of CBD, but a low level of THC. So 20% CBD, 0.3% THC. Its brother, marijuana, or sister, marijuana, contains less than 10% CBD, but contains more than 20% THC. So that's the biggest stark difference between the two. Now, I want to talk about what is happening and why this has become an issue. So when we compare the two, some of the conditions, First, I want you to understand CBD can be extracted from both marijuana and hemp. It comes from the stalk of the plant, and it is extracted from the stalk of the plant. So let's talk about some of the conditions: pain, anxiety, epilepsy, insomnia, arthritis, anxiety, chronic pain are conditions that the drugs being touted to help people. Let's talk about some reality of what's happening. So we have what is right now a $600 million industry, and it is expected to grow to 1.2 billion, not 20 billion, 1.2 billion by 2022. So we've seen this industry explode literally, and the drive is to get products on the market. Now, if I have a shortage of supply, but I still have demand, then I'm going to start pushing out product to meet that demand, right? That's business. What's happening is the hemp industry hasn't been able to grow enough to keep up with the supply for the CBD. And so they are pushing product out to the market. Some of the manufacturers are actually pushing marijuana-based CBD products. Why? They're filling those orders. It's demand. And so some of what we're seeing is the fact that those products have more than the 0.3% THC that the Farm Act actually requires. Now, 7 out of 10 of the products tested by the FDA did not contain the amount of CBD stated on the label. Many of them were far less than what the label said. 1 in 5 contain THC greater than 0.3%. And so the FDA, this is not a regulated area, and the FDA basically said, listen, we have an unregulated area. We don't regulate vitamins. That's where this falls into. So let me give you an example. If you walk into CVS today, and you pick up a bottle of 500 milligrams of vitamin C, no one is testing that what you actually got was 500 milligrams of vitamin C. It's not how the industry works. Now, what the big manufacturers do is they self-regulate. And what that actually means is they send their product off to an independent lab. That lab tests the product, and then they post those findings. That's self-regulation. That's what the vitamin industry is. But the FDA, knowing that 1 out of 5 of these products is not meeting the label and not in greater than the 0.3% THC, the FDA has been sending warning letters, and they are cracking down on manufacturers. Why is that important? You might ask, Dyann, why is that important? It's important because when we see drug tests that are coming back positive for marijuana from people who are claiming that they were using CBD, what I want you to realize is this is the reason why. It's based on the products they're buying. So what I've said to a lot of people is, listen, you gotta self-regulate the product. If you are buying a product at the truck stop, guess what? You're probably getting a product that's higher than 0.3 THC. If you're buying a product from a reputable manufacturer, it's likely to be below that 0.3. And it's a buyer beware situation. I'm going to buy products for CBD that literally have been tested by an independent lab and proven that this manufacturer is in fact putting out what they say they're putting out. So John Hopkins Medicine studied pure CBD, CBD dominant cannabis, showed that pure CBD did not produce any positive drug test results. 2 out of 6 participants tested positive after they ingested CBD dominant supplements. So the positive tests are occurring across the board. But again, it is a buyer beware situation. And the most important element here is that people understand they've got to regulate the regulators. They got to regulate the manufacturers so that what they are getting is what they believe they were buying, and that it's below that 0.3% THC so that they don't put their job in jeopardy. Hope that makes sense. And I'm actually going to pause there because are there any questions on CBD before I move forward? And Carrie, if you guys and Stephanie, if you could help me, are there any questions there?
I am not seeing any questions on CBD. They may be typing if they have, if they do have questions. So maybe there was a question a little bit ago in the chat that asked about if folks, and it's not CBD, but we'll see if we have any on those. But someone asked if someone holds a medical marijuana card, are they limited on how many times they can go and how much they can purchase, or can they go to different dispensaries, or what is there like a limit on the cards when they get them?
Yeah, there are limits for how much a individual can purchase. I would have to look up what those limitations are because I'm not on that side of the industry, but there are limitations on how much they can purchase and how it's really how much they can purchase for that individual that has the medical marijuana card. So if I wanted to, I could go to 2 or 3 different dispensaries, but the limitation is on how much of the product I could actually purchase.
Okay.
Do you know
so
how
like
much
they couldn't go from one to the next? I'm not seeing anything on CBD specifically right now. I think that was a really good explanation because I know I get a lot of questions on that.
Yeah, no, they could go to multiple locations. They could go to 3 different dispensaries to buy their product. But what the state regulation is on is how much that individual with the medical marijuana card can actually purchase.
Oh, good, good. So like they talk to each other, or there's some database statewide that they all have to go under.
Yes, our state database is actually pretty robust. It's one of the most robust systems. We actually bought the same system that Colorado uses. The system is not we, but the state bought. I'm not part of that world, but so the state bought a pretty robust system, and it has that information is within that system, and it's real time. So as a card holder, I couldn't go to 4 different facilities back to back to back because my sales are going to show up in the system, and that's being regulated.
Perfect, perfect. All right, no, I'm not seeing any other questions about CBD at this time. So if folks, if you have questions, make sure you put them in the chat and we will definitely get them at the end.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you. So there was another question, and that question, I just saw it as I was popping through, and that is how much tax dollars have been generated. From the standpoint of tax dollars, that's going to be reported in February of this year. And so from a revenue standpoint, that information is going to drill up, but we are not going to see it until February, March of this year to know what those tax revenues were from last year. And so that's important. It's a great question. You know, we could call the state and say, what is the estimate? Because they certainly know the sales. And we know that with the number of dollars that have been sold, let me just go back. We know that with the dollars that have been sold, and we're at that bad idea, Dyann, bad idea. Here we are, $277.2 million in product have been sold so far. So 30% of that revenue would actually be the estimated state tax, because our state tax is right at that 30% margin. So that would be 2.7369, just about 8.4. Don't count my math as accurate, but just about $8.4 million would be a rough estimate of what's been generated from a state tax standpoint. Again, really rough estimate, just based on the sales. All right. So with that, one thing that's really important that I want everyone to know, and I kept alluding to this, is that there's currently a constitutional amendment to regulate marijuana like alcohol. That's in Ohio, but this is also happening on a federal level as well. And the response was due March 12th. It was of 2020. It was delayed because of COVID-19. And this is what I want you to understand is this is the first step in the process to review the Ohio legislation, but on a federal level to review the DEA's scheduling of marijuana. Now, what is my guess? My guess is this. In August, September of 2021, we are likely going to see the DEA reschedule marijuana from a Schedule 1 to a Schedule 2 drug. Now, what does that mean? It means that marijuana will be identified as a drug that still has high potential for abuse, but there is some legitimate medical use that the drug offers. Now, lots of people get heartburn when I say that, and they're like, oh my goodness, here we go. The slippery slope is going to begin. And I'm going to say, I will not disagree with you. Here's the thing, though. What I need you to understand is cocaine is a Schedule 2 drug. Cocaine is listed as a Schedule 2 drug. That's important for all of us to recognize. I'm not worried about my employees going out and getting cocaine, right? So there's going to be regulations on it. Will it open up how we're currently testing for marijuana? Yes, it will. Will it open up the fact that the MROs have to then verify whether it was a legitimate medical use? They will. Will it change how we test? Probably it will. And why do I say that? Currently, we are using urine as the primary test method for drug testing. Urine shows a up to 21, 28-day range for marijuana's presence in the system. What we will have to look at is likely saliva. And I'm going to populate this for you so you see it. But if legalized, and I'll show you those time frames here in a second, if legalized for recreational in Ohio, that would shift two things: how we test and what impairment looks like. And I'm going to cover those with you just like in a fast forward kind of way. So some of the things, red eyes, poor muscle coordination, increased appetite, delayed reaction time. Marijuana has the distinct smell, almost described as a skunk-like smell. However, let me put a caveat on that. If they are smoking marijuana and they are using a vape, you're not going to smell marijuana. There is no smell to it. So now we need to be looking for the signs and symptoms: panic attacks, anxiety, poor muscle, limb coordination, delayed reaction time and abilities, initial liveliness, increase in heart rate, distorted sense, and then red eyes would be across the board for all of them. So it's going to be important that we are looking for what the signs and symptoms of impairment are for marijuana. So from a drug testing standpoint, again, 1 in 5 people have admitted to using marijuana during work hours. 57% of cannabis consumers are millennials. Those are the kids that are 23 to 38. When we look at the demographics, 75% of the workforce by 2025, they will be 75% of the workforce. Marijuana use has been linked to increase in job accidents and injuries, which is the primary reason why we're testing. It's a safety protocol. We want to keep our employees safe. Employers who test for marijuana had a 55% more employees who tested positive for marijuana, I'm like, that's not computing, had 55% more industrial accidents 85% more injuries, and 75% greater absenteeism across the board. Researchers suggest that potential for increased use of marijuana among adults over 21 in states where it has been legalized. And then the number of accidents, driving accidents in particular, have also increased in those states where recreational marijuana has been legalized. So test detection. Urine will detect marijuana for 3 to 28 days. Saliva will detect marijuana for 3 to 12 hours, which is the window of impairment. And if marijuana is rescheduled or it is legalized at any level on federal law, we will likely switch marijuana from urine testing to saliva testing. And here's the reason I want you to ask this question time and time again. If impairment becomes the issue, impairment testing would be the shorter duration test, 3 to 12 hours. That's what we're looking for. That becomes the window that we're testing for. So saliva would be the natural move. Hair, 30 to 45 days is the range. So employers should focus on deciding the company's position when it comes to medical marijuana. Are we going to allow it? Are we going to allow employees who have medical issues to use medical marijuana? What is the risk? Are there job categories that we're going to allow, or are we just going to say across the board? Absolutely not. Those are decisions you have to make from a business standpoint. Who and what circumstances would we allow medical marijuana? Update and distribute the drug-free policy is critical. I want you to also consider specifying the actions that would be taken for employees that violate the policy. Establish the policy, and if you haven't done it, what is prohibited by that policy? With that, educate your employees about the dangers of drugs and alcohol use, including medical marijuana and the opiate crisis, which I don't want to get overshadowed. Guys, we've got the opiate crisis through COVID-19, this pandemic that is spiraling again out of control. So don't overlook that piece of the puzzle either. Refresh your supervisor's reasonable suspicion training. It is critical to ensure that compliance is occurring. Implement comprehensive drug testing programs. Strongly consider the BWC's drug-free safety program. Increase your random testing. And then the cornerstones, really quickly, and we'll get to questions. Policies and procedures, employee education. And lots of people are saying to me, well, Dyann, how do we educate in the midst of the coronavirus? Online education works. If you want to do online training, you need help setting up online training, call me. I'll take care of you. That is an area we have shifted. We have an online training portal that is up and it is running. And if I must admit, it is good, really good. Spent a lot of time making sure that we cross the T's and dotted the I's, but make sure training happens. Testing. Put an emphasis on your testing program. With all that is happening, something shouldn't change. We have employees who are still working. We have employees who are still in the workplace. Those employees are still being tested, post-accident testing. All those things still need to be occurring. And then resources that are available for help for everyone. So I'm going to populate these through. And then I'm going to jump to questions, but things I want you to consider. Eliminating ambiguous language in your policies. Nothing makes me crazier than language that says up to and including discipline. If you're going to terminate employment, what your policy should say is, we're going to terminate employment. Classifying safety sensitive positions. Every employer needs to look at every job and determine if with a momentary lapse of judgment, this individual's job could hurt, injure, or kill them or someone else, classify the jobs as safety sensitive if the answer to that question is yes. Confidential records, record keeping, last chance agreement, all need to be in place. I'm going to jump to questions because I want to make sure that I have left enough time for your questions. So, Stephanie or Carrie, if you could help me with that, I would certainly appreciate it.
Awesome. Okay, so I did get a question. Lots of thanks, and this is a lot of really good information. One said, with such good information, will the slides be available for reference later, or can they get a hold of you to get those?
Absolutely. You can either get a hold of me, or I'll make the PDF available to Medina. I don't mind doing that. What I always say is, if you don't run to my competitors and just give my proprietary information to them, I would much appreciate it. It's kind of important to me. But I don't mind sharing the information in that way. And you can either
Awesome.
from the Safety Council, or you can email me and I will put that information out there. I think this will also be available. The presentation will also be available on your portal as well, right? From the Safety Council.
She's recording.
Yes, yeah, I was going to say, Dyann, if you send us the slides, we can send it out with a copy of the presentation. And I know we have quite a few individuals that are calling in via phone. So since you don't have access to the chat box, if you have a question for Dyann and you are calling in via phone, you can click *6 to unmute yourself, and then you can ask your question.
Yeah, so let's open it up for questions, guys. What questions do you have? And I'm looking to make sure that.
Yep, I'm watching for him too. I know I've been asked if it does get switched to a Schedule II drug, the employers will still have the right to say no, not at my workplace. Just like with alcohol, alcohol is legal, tobacco is legal, but there's still employers that say no, that it's not acceptable to use that while you're working, or to be intoxicated while you're working. Like, none of that changes with marijuana, right?
Right. It will still be an issue of using in the workplace. It will still be an issue of impairment in the workplace. There will never be anything that says to an employer, yes, you have to allow your employees to be impaired and to create a danger in the workplace, right? Everything for us actually says the opposite. I mean, when we look at OSHA says we have a responsibility to safety in the workplace. That won't change. Now, will it change the fact that we will have some individuals who meet the criteria and therefore medical use is allowed under the federal law? Yes, that is going to happen. And I think it's going to happen in the fall. I could be wrong. I may eat crow, but I think it's all the indicators say that's where we're headed in the fall of this year. But safety, absolutely. Toe the line, make your employees toe the line. And at the end of the day, we won't allow employees to be put in a dangerous situation. Any other questions?
And again, if you are calling in via phone and not with us on a computer or mobile device, and you have a question, you just need to type *6 on your phone, which will unmute you, and then you can ask your question.
Thank you. And thank you for the compliments in the boxes, guys. I appreciate that. And I will say this again, if you have a question, if you're shy, you can call me directly. You can email me directly. I think that my job is to provide information in a way that helps all of us keep the workplace safe. It helps all of us drive our programs to be better and to be a resource. So consider me a resource if I can answer questions. If you're you're in the DFSP program and the deadline is coming up in March and you're going, how am I going to train my employees? And I don't want to bring everybody together in groups, or how do we do that? Call me. I'm a resource. I would love to help guide you through that process. and help you get it done so that's done right.
And I did put your email up in the, or I put your email in the chat at the beginning, and then I just put it a little bit ago. No, I'm not seeing any questions. So if folks have any questions, they're welcome to type in there now. Stephanie, do you have anything in closing while we're waiting to see if anything?
Just to mark the date on your calendar, third Tuesday of every month, we are committed to bringing programming through the end of this fiscal year, which will be through June. So our next meeting will be Tuesday, February 16th from noon until 1. The topic is going to be Stop the Bleed. And we will have a couple representatives from Cleveland Clinic, Akron General, with extensive experience for presenting for that day. You'll look for the information on our website probably in the next couple of days to get registered for that. And as we mentioned, we'll send out a video of this recording along with the PowerPoint slides and Diane's information. So if you want to contact her directly, or feel free to get in touch with Carrie and myself, and we can get questions over to her as well.
Thank you, guys.
Well,
and
thank
again,
you so
if there's
much,
anything
Diane.
I can do, thank you. If there's anything I can do, consider me a resource, and any way that I can help, don't hesitate to reach out. And if I don't know, the one thing you'll learn about me is I'm going to go, yeah, you know what? I don't know, but I know where to find an answer for you. So consider me a resource to you and to getting really HR systems and drug-free workplace programs and training done right in the workplace every single time.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I know they're applauding loudly. We just can't hear them because they're muted right now. So I know that is happening. I will say one last thing in closing, guys. If you have folks at your facility that are trained in first aid, CPR, you want to have someone there next month. If not, maybe you could even have multiple folks in your committee. Stop the Bleed is just a extension of your first aid CPR training. So definitely a good idea to have someone there that is involved in that part and can share with the rest of your group. So with that, thank you, Diane.
Thank you, guys.
Folks are welcome to jump off. Yes, stay safe and stay warm out there, as it looks like we're going to get a little bit more snow tonight. So we appreciate you guys. And if anybody does have any questions, we're around.
Thank you for joining us today.